Good day and thank you for joining CivilNet. The Justice Within Armenia petition that's been online for almost a week now, a large initiative which concentrates on justice in Armenia, points out all the injustice that's been happening, and also offers a support system, offers to establish free and fair elections, which is a very productive, good first step towards fixing everything that needs to be fixing in Armenia. And on the subject, I'll be speaking with renowned filmmaker Atom Egoyan. We're reaching to Toronto. Atom, thank you for joining us today.
Of course.
Your name is not often associated with anything. This is not political, but again, anything that goes on within Armenia. You're a person of culture, and everything that's wrong that's listed in the petition. Surely July wasn't the first point that you realized that a lot of things in Armenia need to be fixed. Was there any particular point from 1993 when you made your first film in Armenia until now that you realized things are not proceeding as democratically as they should?
That's a great question. Actually, Arsene and I were there in 1991, before independence, just before. We were there from the Moscow Film Festival. We made our first trip. And even at that moment, there was just this feeling in the air that something huge was going to happen, that there was a possibility of change. And so when we came back a year later, 1992, the country was independent. The country was also experiencing extraordinary problems. I mean, we had a huge electrical shortage. We were there shooting a film with this crisis around us. There was still the residual crisis from the earthquake, of course, but there was this feeling that the people would endure, the country could endure, that somehow this was a golden opportunity, something we could not have imagined, that we would have an independent state. And from the very beginning, you know, Arsene and I were very committed to this idea. And really, I think as we saw what happened over the next few years, we taught ourselves to believe, like many diasporan Armenians, that this was all the result of the Soviet thinking, that basically there was this mentality that was going to change with the new generation, that what we were seeing in terms of the tone of the country was a residue of 70 years of Soviet thinking. So I think there was a patience, and that even though we were seeing that there were these oligarchical sort of formations, even though we saw that there were deprivations, even though we had suspicions that perhaps all the money that was being sent to Gumri, to all these places to help rebuild, that somehow things were not moving the way that everyone thought. And on top of it, of course, there was all sorts of political issues with Artsakh. There was like all sorts of extraordinary pressures that were being put on the country. So we understood that we did need to have a strong militaristic formation. We knew that we needed to have a strong united army, and we respected and continue to respect the need to defend our territory. I mean, this is absolutely essential. No one is questioning this. But we also saw the formation of a culture around this idea of defense, and that there was a mythology around it which allowed the power structure to keep its control. And I think what happened in July was that we saw heroes from Artsakh. We saw people who had been fighting as soldiers actually saying that something had to change as well, that suddenly this mythology was broken in a very extreme way. This is with the takeover of the police station, the Japanese police station with Tazna Zerer. You know, we saw that this was, and of course, I mean, to see my wife detained, to see Arsene detained, this was very shocking, and all that imagery was almost unbelievable, and created, I would say I mean, there was an awareness, but it suddenly became incredibly urgent because we were, as I was saying, the mythology of what we had sustained ourselves to believe was being challenged in a very radical way.
Well, also, in a way, the grace period probably you gave for Armenia to change and develop, this transitional period probably should have been already up by 25 years of independence.
Yes, in retrospect, we can say this. I mean, we kept saying, it needs a generation to change. And of course, it's been more than a generation. And we're seeing actually certain ideas consolidated. They're not shifting at all. Matter of fact, they may be becoming worse. Look, we are very patriotic. We're very passionate about, being able to see that this country survives. And I think that maybe, yes, we were prepared to give a grace period, but let's also question what it is that we can do. I mean, we're not, even though we make trips there every year, and obviously I've been involved with cultural activities there and really trying to do everything I can to promote the idea, to bring people from outside to Armenia through the film festival and through various initiatives that we've been involved with. Something more has to happen. And you talk about a grace period. I would rather say that we were expecting a natural evolution towards a true democracy, something that is actually constitutionally enshrined. We're not, this is very important to understand. What Justice Within Armenia is proposing is nothing radical. We're actually just saying that it's within our constitution. We just want to see these rights respected, and we want to be able to make sure that there is a real transparency in terms of the process. That's really all we can do. I mean, and yet it does seem that it has hit a note, and I think that what you have to realize is that let's say Arsene's letter, open letter that she published, it was in Grunk. It's been effectively blocked by a lot of the Diasporan political parties. It's as though the conversation is being closed down by the Diasporan parties as well, like between the Ramgavars and the Tashnags and the Hunchaks. It's as though there's this zone of silence around having a conversation.
And what's the reason behind that? Is that they have certain relations with Armenia, that they don't want to be upset, they're not ready for this kind of change? After all, the petition is not in any way suggesting anything radical. If we're very honest about it, it's very traditional. We're saying what people have been saying for hundreds of years: democracy, elections.
Right. So that's a very good question you're posing, and I would actually ask that really for our major parties. Why isn't there an unconditional support for what Justice Within Armenia is suggesting? I don't understand it, because it is really respecting what is constitutionally within our makeup. It's and actually can only be good for the country. It can only be good for the country. We're not if the current party wins a fair election, there's very little we can do but respect that. That is part of what democracy is. But we want to make sure clearly that the election is transparent. It's a very simple request, and we're saying that the very fact that there's a cynicism about this, the very fact that people are and we've observed this, that people are somehow saying, well, that's just the way it is. We're saying, actually, as Diasporan Armenians, we can't accept that anymore. This is not how it should be.
Putting aside the constitutionalized political parties or organizations, the petition has gained about 2,700 plus something support in in a relatively long time now, we could say, and it's got such a big number of people, celebrity names, as such a consolidation that probably hasn't happened around any issue regarding Armenia. So is there also a coldness or lack of understanding from individuals? The diaspora is huge.
The real problem is that we are, as a people, everyone can understand, Armenians historically have respected what they've been told to do by their leaders. It's somehow, there is in our culture a suspicion of individualism. And I won't get into the details of that. Suffice it to say that until such time as the parties actually recognize that what we are proposing is not harmful, that is actually only going to be for the benefit of what the country can become, there will be resistance from the Armenian public. There will be suspicion because people, and as a culture, we wait to be told what to do by our religious leaders, by our political leaders. This is just part of our conditioning. I'm not saying it's good or bad, it's just part of who we are. And I think that what you're seeing with this petition is a group of artists and free thinkers who are individualists. And we are appealing to other people who can actually understand what is going to be best for the country. It's clear, but we are also waiting that the parties can actually understand that we're not proposing something that is against anyone's interest. We are saying that this is intrinsic to our healthy evolution as a democratic state. It's as simple or as complex as that. And I think, I'm just looking at this this letter that Arseny sent out. It's available on Grunk. It's been picked up by transparency.org. But
it's also on CivilNet.
Yeah, but look, I mean, none of the organs of the parties, none of the papers of the parties in the diaspora have actually decided to publish it. Why is that? And we have to start asking these questions because, really, I understand how important our leaders have been in ensuring our resistance against unbelievable opposition. I mean, of course, these parties have been intrinsic to our survival. No question about that. And again, let me emphasize that a strong military, a strong army is essential to our survival. No question about that. But this can go hand in hand with having a transparent democratic process where we can have these conversations, where we can have these discussions like we're having now. We should not feel fear. We should not feel apathy. We should not feel cynicism. If we continue on this path, we are going to see something that in our most horrible nightmare, we do not want to lose what we have been dreaming of for so long. And this is a crucial moment. What we are seeing, what we saw in July, is not an aberration. It has been building up. And if we do not act on this collectively, if we do not actually understand this moment that we're at, then we owe it to ourselves to take responsibility for where we are.
Yes, so there's no doubt that the diaspora and Armenia can consolidate when there's an external enemy, when there's an issue such as the Karabakh conflict, and we saw that happen in April of this year. So now, after April and after July, we understand that both Armenia, the population here, and the Armenian population in the diaspora have psychological handicaps. What do they need to understand about each other more? What's this divide? How can this divide be understood? Because, there's no precedent that we've united to fight injustice within Armenia. We are very good at uniting to fight injustice that's coming from outside.
Yes, and this is absolutely a part of our formation. We need this, of course. We have all been conditioned to see that the enemy is outside. We have all been conditioned to believe we need to fight together against that enemy. And we are surrounded by enemies. So this is a huge part of our makeup. I mean, it is essential to our survival that we understand our situation geopolitically and historically. But that cannot become, in and of itself, a culture which doesn't examine how to sustain its own healthy growth internally. And the two are not mutually opposing. I mean, you only have to look at the economic state of where the country is right now. Like, there are huge issues, and a lot of them have to do because we have not examined and held responsibility for how monies are being used, how influence is being used, how talent is being utilized. That we need to keep our talent within the country. We need to be able to feel hope and that people can raise families and expect that there is a future within Armenia. And part of that, of course, is to have very strong borders, to have very smart diplomats, to have excellent negotiators. But it also means at a micro level that within the villages, within the towns, throughout the whole country, that people feel that their voice is being heard. And it's being heard in a democratic way. So when they go and vote, they are voting for the party that they believe represents their interests. That also means that those individuals, the citizenry needs to be educated as to what is best for their interests, but that is something that they have to do themselves. No one from the diaspora is going to teach anyone within Armenia what is best for them. That is off the table. I mean, that would be arrogant, and I think that's a mentality that I think has created this distrust.
And that's somehow the main criticism to the Justice Within Armenia petition, because a lot of the criticism I read, relevant or irrelevant, says that the diasporan Armenians shouldn't interfere in Armenia's internal affairs, especially if they're not living here.
I'm sorry, but
it's perceived as the diaspora trying to teach Armenia.
I'm sorry, I understand this criticism, but let's be clear about this. We are just trying to make sure that the systems within the country that are within the constitution, that are actually enshrined, are being observed. We're not proposing anything more radical than that. And we're saying that part of the cynicism and the apathy and the hopelessness that we are seeing in the country is a result of people feeling that they've been disenfranchised. And that is something that we feel we can help correct. But it's only if the people within the country want that. Let's also be clear about that. Like we are assuming that the citizens of Armenia want to have a transparent political process where their voice is being heard. I mean, that's a given. It would be so strange to think that the people within Armenia are happy with the current state of affairs. They may well be, but that's a decision that they have to vote on. We cannot vote from outside. We are not citizens of the country, but we are people who are passionate about the health of the country, about the survival of the country. We have committed lots of our resources, lots of our money to being able to help sustain this place, and we want to have some stake in that. And the only stake we can have is by ensuring a democratic process is being adhered to, and that people are educated within the country about their own power as citizens to affect change. That's the bottom line. We can't really expect more than that.
Adam, there's a continuation to this petition as part two, a more practical part as to how do you implement the support system, which is very democratic because, for example, we let the OSCE come in and monitor, we let any European country come in and monitor and also sponsor free and fair elections in Armenia. However, when the diaspora says it, there's kind of a resistance to it. But well, going back to my question, the practical side, if there are going to be observers, how are they going to be trained as observers? Are there enough people who'll have the time and energy and the commitment to do this? Are they aware of the fact that if they come and they're at a polling station, there could be, to some extent, some pressure on them to leave or not hinder them from doing their work?
That's an interesting scenario, isn't it? Why would there be pressure or intimidation against an observer? I mean, if there is fear of that, then we're looking at the very root of the problem. I mean, if anyone would go as an observer to a polling station and expect fear or violence, then that becomes a really dire issue, doesn't it? And we have to address, well, like.
Unfortunately, there's quite a bit of proof that the media, not only CivilNet, a lot of media outlets have quite a bit of proof of that happening.
Okay, well, that's the problem, isn't it? Well, and we need people who are brave, people who understand. I mean, look, again, we're painting a nightmare scenario. I mean, it would be ridiculous to think that there would be a movement against people observing a democratic process being carried out. I mean, that would be a nightmare scenario, and one doesn't even want to go there because we're expecting and understanding and anticipating that people within the country understand that what a democracy offers is the clearest way to have their voice heard. There is historically no other way that is proven as effective as a democratic process. But we also understand that there are forces that are threatened by a democratic process. So how do we change things? How we change things is by having observers and saying that if something is being mishandled, if something is being manipulated, if something is being unfairly treated, that's being called, and that people are held to account for that. Now, we need, I think it's clear that if we're going to go into this, people have to be committed to the idea. They have to be trained, basically, and there are organizations that can help do that. We have time to prepare for that. But this should not be seen as in any way a threat to what is healthy for Armenia. Like it's time tested, and we have an obligation to actually police the tenets of our constitution. Now, when I say we, I guess maybe this is the issue. What is diaspora's role in policing the constitution of Armenia? Well, this becomes delicate. Again, we are not voting. We do not have the right to vote. We can only ensure that the people who have a right to vote do that with a sense of optimism and a sense that their vote is going to be heard. More than that, we do wander into a very dangerous place because we cannot directly affect political consequence if we want to be neutral observers. The two don't actually line up. But we can do whatever we can to make sure that people understand that we are there to help and that we believe passionately that this is the way forward.
I did not know this before, but now I do that. Your background is also actually in international relations. All my studies are in international relations. That's what I graduated in. I thought I was going to be a diplomat. I actually know the history of the country like the back of my hand because my thesis was about the establishment of the independent republic. So I'm actually I've written extensively about the formation of the country. So I actually am not a neophyte when it comes to questions of political construction. Look, I mean, this is why, like anyone who has studied the history of this country knows that 25 years ago we were given this amazing gift. You know, in the whole history of our nation, we had 2 years of independence, and it was a very perilous moment, as we know, as historians can say. After the First World War, you know, many different attempts were made. There was a trans-Caucasian state. There was all sorts of attempts to keep an independence afloat, but we couldn't. We just didn't have the means. We now have the means. You know, we have the means to ensure our independence and our health as a country. But it's our belief that the best way to do that is by ensuring a clear democratic voice for the people within Armenia. That's all we can do to help. I mean, of course, you can talk about other initiatives, and you can talk about, and we've tried this. I mean, and I don't want to even go there. I don't want to talk about the history of diaspora and the country. I think there have been disappointments. I mean, at a personal level, I would say, why haven't more diasporans populated Artsakh? Like why don't we have this in our formation? There is also an obligation for us from outside to repopulate perhaps as well. We can go into those discussions, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something very specific, which is what needs to happen in the spring. So addressing the political science, Atom Egoyan, the political scientist, Armenia's potential. Let's assume that the next elections are freer and fairer. Armenia's potential as a republic within the world. How do you envisage it? Or let's assume things didn't go aside at one point. Where should have Armenia been already?
Well, Armenia is in a geopolitical position which is very important to anyone who looks at a map of the world, and it becomes increasingly clear how important our position is. We have leverage just by virtue of where we are geopolitically. We have leverage because we have formed relations with certain countries that don't necessarily speak with each other, and so we can actually ensure that we are at a crossroad and use that to our advantage. We also should be able to ensure that within the country we have a healthy conversation about what's best internally, and that means to have a strong opposition, strong government, to respect all the traditions of a parliament. I mean, these are just building blocks that have been tried and true, and we need to ensure to keep what is given to us as a gift. As a patriot, as someone who has studied our history, who really is passionate about these issues, I can say unequivocally that 25 years ago we were given a gift. And I can say that in order to be able to respect that, we need to make sure that there is hope. And hope comes from people feeling that they have agency, that they have the ability to change things, to affect that there will be shifts as they need to be through a democratic process. Within Armenia is proposing is something that's really so natural to the state of a healthy country, which is that people should feel that they have access to change, that they have access to change, they have access to representation through a free election. No one is suggesting from any of the people who are signing the petition that we should have anything but a democratically elected government, and that people should be informed about their choices. They should understand who are the individuals who are representing them. They should believe that those people represent their best interests. They should know what their best interests are, and they should have faith that the system can actually provide some sort of transparency and some sort of resolution to this huge issue of how to keep a country running in an effective way. What we are seeing right now is not tenable. When we look at the statistics, when we look at the depopulation of our country, when we look at the economic state of affairs, when we look at the distribution of wealth, I think that anyone would say that there are issues. Now, the question for the population of Armenia is whether or not these issues are alarming, whether or not you want change. And if you want change, then you have to be able to vote freely in a national election to express yourself. And you should be able to do that knowing that your vote counts, knowing that when you go to a polling station, your vote is going to be counted properly, and it's going to create a government that you can actually respect.
Right. Thank you very much.
That's it.
Yes, thank you very much. And we thank the viewers for joining us. And well, we hope everyone's vote will be accounted for in the next elections.